Welcome back to another deep dive. We're picking up where we left off in our exploration of Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah, this is part 3.
We've already, gone pretty deep into his early work with Freud and his ideas about character armor, which are really fascinating.
Really are.
But today, I kind of want to get into something that I think is particularly relevant to all of us,
I think so too.
especially in today's world.
Absolutely.
And that is the question of, are we settling for what Reich called mechanical orgasms,
Ooh, interesting.
without realizing that there's a deeper, more transformative experience waiting to be unlocked?
Big question.
It is a big question.
Yeah.
And to help us unpack this a little bit, we've got a few different sources. We're looking at Reich's Wikipedia entry, excerpts from his book, Character Analysis,
Okay.
and some other articles we found online about his life and work.
Sounds good.
So to kind of set the stage, Reich believed that the capacity for deep, fulfilling pleasure is directly tied to our ability to release tension, both physically and emotionally. And he called this orgastic potency.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just about the physical act. It's really about a total letting go, a complete surrender to the experience.
Interesting. So more than just the physical sensation.
Right, exactly. He's really talking about a much deeper level of release,
I see.
almost like a spiritual experience.
Like a transcendence, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he saw it as a way to kind of break through what he called the armor.
The armor.
Right. And these are those layers of muscular tension that we build up that reflect our emotional blocks, past traumas.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. And I think it's something that a lot of us can relate to. Think about how often you hold tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your back.
Oh, all the time. I mean, especially these days, it's like...
It's like you're carrying the weight of the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Reich believed that this physical holding, it actually reflects a deeper holding back emotionally.
Right. Like they're connected.
So he's saying that by releasing that physical tension, we can also unlock deeper emotional release
Okay.
and therefore experience more pleasure.
Interesting. So it's a pathway.
It is. It's a pathway. And, he actually developed a therapy called vegetotherapy,
Vegetotherapy.
where he would use physical touch, almost like a deep tissue massage,
Wow.
to help patients release this muscular armor.
That's pretty out there.
It is a little out there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I can see that. But what if he was onto something, right?
I mean, it's possible.
What if we are literally holding ourselves back
Yeah.
from experiencing deeper pleasure because we're so afraid to let go,
Because we're holding on too tight.
to surrender to the moment?
Yeah, the fear of letting go, right?
Exactly.
It can really manifest in the body. We tense up, we guard ourselves.
And it creates a barrier to experiencing that full spectrum of sensations, both physically and emotionally.
That makes sense. So what did he do with this information? Like, how did he try to prove it?
Well, he did something really interesting. And again, this is where it gets a little out there. He actually used an oscillograph.
What's an oscillograph?
It's a device that measures electrical charges.
Oh, okay.
To measure the electrical charge during orgasm in volunteers.
Like he had people,
He had people come in and, he wanted to see if there was this energetic release that was measurable.
oh, wow. That's pretty wild.
It is wild. And you know what's even wilder?
What?
One of his volunteers was Willy Brandt,
No way.
who would later become the Chancellor of Germany.
Wow.
So this was like a pretty serious, undertaking for him.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, he was really dedicated to this.
He was. And it makes you wonder, what did Willy Brandt get out of that experience?
Right. Did he have some kind of profound breakthrough?
Or was he just like, well, that was weird. We'll never know.
We'll never know. That's history for you.
But what's fascinating here is that Reich wasn't just talking about sex in a purely physical sense.
Right. It was more than that.
He was exploring the connection between sexuality, emotion,
Yeah.
and even spirituality.
He was really looking at the whole person.
He was.
Yeah.
And so, how do we apply this to our own lives,
That's the question.
right? Are we all just walking around, armored up, missing out on this deeper level of experience?
That's a good question. And I think it's one that each of us has to answer for ourselves.
And it makes me think about those moments in life when we do experience that kind of complete release,
Okay.
whether it's through a good cry, a deep belly laugh, or even a powerful physical experience.
Yeah.
There's a sense of lightness, of freedom that comes with it.
There is. Like something shifts.
Something shifts, exactly.
Yeah.
And those moments can be incredibly transformative.
Absolutely.
They remind us that we're not just our thoughts, our anxieties, our defenses,
Yeah.
that there's a deeper well of energy and aliveness within us, just waiting to be tapped into.
Waiting to be unlocked.
So how do we access that deeper well?
How do we get there?
Is it just about becoming more aware of our bodies? Or is there more to it?
Well, I think it's definitely about awareness, right?
Yeah.
Paying attention to those subtle sensations in our bodies, noticing where we hold tension.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, starting to let go a little bit.
It's like we're talking about a kind of mindfulness.
Exactly. Cultivating a deeper awareness of ourselves.
Right.
Both physically and emotionally. And it's not always easy. You know, Reich believed that this armoring, it's a defense mechanism.
Okay.
We build it up to protect ourselves from pain, from vulnerability.
So letting go of that armor means facing those uncomfortable emotions, those past hurt that we've been trying to avoid.
It can be challenging, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly liberating.
Okay.
Reich believed that by facing those deeper emotions, by allowing ourselves to really truly feel them, we can actually release their hold on us. And in that release, there's a tremendous potential for healing, for growth.
Yeah.
And yes, for deeper pleasure.
It makes me think about those moments in life when we do experience that kind of complete release.
Yeah.
Whether it's through a good cry or a deep belly laugh or even a powerful physical experience, there's a sense of lightness, of freedom that comes with it.
Absolutely. And those moments can be so transformative.
I can.
They remind us that we're not just our thoughts, our anxieties, our defenses. There's a deeper well of energy and aliveness within us.
Yeah.
Just waiting to be tapped into.
So how do we access that? How do we get there? Is it just about becoming more aware of our bodies? Or is there more to it?
Well, Reich believed that therapy could be a really powerful tool for this.
Okay.
For breaking down that armoring and accessing deeper levels of feeling.
Okay.
But he also really emphasized the importance of lifestyle choices.
Okay.
Creating an environment that supports emotional expression and physical vitality.
So things like healthy eating, exercise, spending time in nature.
Exactly.
All of these could contribute to a more fluid, energetic state.
He saw it as a very holistic approach.
Right.
It's not just about addressing the psychological or the physical in isolation.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that they're interconnected.
Right.
And supporting both.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about creating a kind of synergy between our mind, body, and spirit. And I guess that brings us back to this question of orgastic potency.
Okay.
Is he suggesting that this deeper level of pleasure is only accessible through sexual experience?
Not necessarily. I mean, while Reich definitely focused a lot on sexuality, I think his ideas about orgastic potency can be applied more broadly.
Okay.
It's really about that capacity for total surrender, for letting go of control, allowing ourselves to be fully present in the moment, whatever that moment may hold.
So it could be a creative breakthrough, a profound connection with nature, a moment of deep empathy with another human being.
Absolutely.
Any experience that allows us to tap into that wellspring of energy and aliveness.
Exactly. And I think that's a really empowering message.
It is.
It means that we're not limited to seeking pleasure in any one specific way.
Right.
The potential for deep, fulfilling experience is available to us in every moment.
Wow.
If we're willing to open ourselves to it.
It's about cultivating a kind of openness,
Yeah.
a receptivity,
Yes.
rather than always trying to control and manage our experiences.
Right. And that can be a real challenge in our modern world,
It can be.
where we're constantly bombarded with stimuli, pressured to be productive, to achieve, to always be on.
Right. Always on.
You're listening to Echoes of Insight, where we dive deep into the topics shaping our world, from the planet and politics to health, consciousness, economy, and alternative lifestyles. If you're enjoying the journey, make sure to subscribe and share this podcast with others who love exploring new perspectives.
It takes a conscious effort to slow down, to tune in, to create space for those deeper experiences to emerge.
And maybe that's part of what drew people to Reich's work.
Maybe.
Even though his ideas were often very controversial, he was offering a path to something more, something deeper than those kind of surface-level pleasures that our culture often prioritizes.
He was inviting us to question our assumptions, to explore the full potential of our being, and to embrace the possibility of a more joyful, more connected way of living.
Speaking of exploring and questioning, we haven't yet touched upon Reich's later work with orgone energy.
Oh, right.
It's a fascinating, if controversial, aspect of his legacy.
It is. And while some of his claims about orgone might seem, a little out there, I think there's a metaphorical truth to his exploration of energy flow.
Okay.
He was fascinated by this idea of a vital life force that permeates all living things.
It's like he was trying to find a scientific explanation for something that many cultures have recognized for centuries.
Right.
That there's this kind of universal energy that connects us all.
Exactly. And even if we don't take his claims about orgone literally, I think it's valuable to consider the role of energy in our own lives.
Right.
Do we cultivate practices that support our energy flow? Or do we deplete ourselves with stress and overstimulation?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a question worth reflecting on.
For sure.
And perhaps it ties back to this idea of letting go of our armor.
Oh, interesting.
If we're constantly tense and guarded, we're restricting that natural flow of energy.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, when we relax, when we allow ourselves to feel and express our emotions fully, we create space for that energy to move more freely.
It's like we're untangling the knots.
Yeah.
Allowing ourselves to become more fluid, more vibrant.
And in that fluidity, there's tremendous potential.
Yeah.
For healing, for creativity, for connection.
It's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, is there a connection between this concept of energy flow and the deeper pleasure that Reich was talking about?
That's a good question.
Is it possible that by cultivating a more fluid, energetic state, we also open ourselves up to more profound experiences of joy and connection?
It's an intriguing question, and one that I think each of us can explore for ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
But I think Reich would argue that there's a definite link between our energetic state and our capacity for pleasure.
He believed that by releasing those physical and emotional blocks, by allowing energy to flow freely through our bodies, we could tap into a deeper wellspring of vitality and aliveness.
And from that place of aliveness, of openness, of receptivity, who knows what kind of transformative experiences might become possible?
It's a tantalizing thought.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about Reich's own life, his relentless pursuit of truth, his willingness to challenge the status quo, even when it meant facing ridicule and persecution.
He was a complex and controversial figure, no doubt.
He was.
But I think his story is a reminder that there's always more to discover.
Yeah.
More to explore, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
And maybe, just maybe, by embracing a little bit of Reich's spirit of inquiry, his willingness to push boundaries and challenge assumptions, we can unlock a deeper level of pleasure and fulfillment in our own lives.
It's certainly a possibility worth considering.
It is.
And who knows, maybe in the process we'll even discover a few truths that the mainstream has yet to embrace.
Now that's a thought-provoking way to end part 2.
It is.
We'll be back in a moment for the final part of our deep dive into the life and work of Wilhelm Reich.
So we've been exploring all these fascinating ideas about, unlocking deeper pleasure and tracing the path from character armor to orgastic potency.
Yeah.
And even touching on, orgone energy.
Right.
But I think it's time we address kind of the elephant in the room.
Oh, okay.
Which is, Reich's downfall.
Right.
It seems like after all those years of pushing boundaries, things finally kind of caught up with him.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tragic chapter in his story, for sure.
It is. So, he immigrated to the U.S. in 1939. And it seemed like he was finding his footing. Right?
Yeah, he was teaching at the New School in New York. He even found love and remarried.
But his ideas, especially those around sexuality, continued to draw a lot of controversy.
They did.
And I can't help but think that his experiences in Europe, being ostracized, fleeing Nazi Germany,
must have really taken a toll on him.
It's understandable.
And it feels like it fueled a kind of paranoia that grew over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And remember, this is the early 1940s. The Red Scare is in full swing.
Right.
Suspicion towards anyone deemed radical is really high.
So Reich, with his talk of sexual revolution and orgone energy, doesn't exactly blend in.
He's not exactly keeping a low profile.
No. And he was building these orgone accumulators.
Right, the accumulators.
Claiming they could concentrate this universal life force and even cure cancer.
It does sound a little out there.
It sounds like science fiction.
It does, doesn't it?
So, was this a case of a brilliant but eccentric scientist being misunderstood?
It's hard to say, really.
Or was there something more to the FDA's investigation?
Right.
And the eventual charges against him?
I think it's a complex question. Reich was undoubtedly brilliant, but he was also fiercely defiant and increasingly isolated in his beliefs.
So he kind of created his own world in a way?
In a way, yeah.
And he saw enemies everywhere.
He did. He even accused government officials of being part of a communist conspiracy.
Wow.
So, it sounds like his mental health was also deteriorating.
Alongside all the legal troubles.
Yeah, sadly, that seems to be the case. He developed these delusions, even believing that the Air Force was monitoring his property for his safety.
So it sounds like it all kind of unraveled.
It did. And in the end, the FDA obtained an injunction against the interstate shipment of his organ accumulators,
Okay.
deeming them fraudulent.
And when Reich refused to comply,
Right.
he was charged with contempt of court
Mm-hmm.
and imprisoned. What a heartbreaking end.
It is for someone who dedicated his life to, understanding the human condition,
Right.
unlocking our capacity for deeper experience.
It's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. But, even though he died in prison in 1957, Reich's legacy continues to spark debate and inspire new ways of thinking
It does.
about the mind, the body. Yeah.
And our potential for pleasure.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it strikes me how relevant his work still feels today.
It does, doesn't it?
We're seeing a resurgence of internal and body work,
Uh-huh.
energy healing,
Hmm.
alternative approaches to sexuality,
Yeah.
all areas where Reich was really a pioneer.
He was ahead of his time in many ways.
It's like we're rediscovering the wisdom he was trying to share all those years ago.
Yeah. Maybe we're finally ready to listen.
So for our listener, what's the most important takeaway from all of this exploration of Wilhelm Reich's life and work?
I think the most important takeaway is that our capacity for pleasure, for joy, for connection is far greater than we often realize.
That's powerful.
Reich really challenged us to look beyond the surface, to explore those intricate ways our minds and bodies interact, and to recognize the potential for deeper, more fulfilling experiences that await when we dare to let go of our armor and embrace the fullness of our being.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. It's a reminder that the journey of self-discovery is ongoing and that there's always more to learn, more to experience, and more to unlock within ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of Wilhelm Reich. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the ideas that shape our world.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Echoes of Insight. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who loves exploring big ideas. Together, let's keep the conversation going. See you next time.